Hello and welcome to Practically Magic Storytelling, a subset of the Practically Magic podcast. I am your host, Courtney Pearl. Today I am going to be a Celtic folklorist and give you a little story time, putting on my Celtic priestess hat and giving you a little inspiration with some Celtic folklore from my own favorite Wales. I'm going to start today's episode by pulling a tarot card, so we are going to get to it. Today, I should be pulling from the Celtic tarot. I'm sure that would be a little bit more aligned with our subject matter today, but I'm going to go with the Witch's Wisdom tarot deck today because that is just what I felt drawn to. And when you follow your intuition, you've got to figure out what works for you. So we're going to pull a card and set up what this episode is about. Hopefully the card's telling us exactly what we need to hear in this moment in time as you're listening to this episode, whenever that might be. We're going to trust that this is the card that was meant for us. Okay, the card that I have pulled is, in this deck, number 10, the Offering. And I love the connections I'm seeing already in the symbolism. So I'm just going to hold it up for the camera. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it's a man who's giving an offering of some sort of liquid. It looks like it might be milk or water to a sapling tree. The tree, if you look very closely, has little ribbons tied to the branches. And then there is sort of an ethereal, ghostly figure of a woman standing just off to the side. He's surrounded by a forest of trees, and she's watching him. I guess it could be a male figure, but it's dressed sort of in a feminine way. So I'm going to say feminine presenting figure, but sort of a ghostly in the background. And there are all these really cool veins of that liquid sprouting out from where the roots touch the ground of the sapling, and it's like these little shoots of, I don't know, it looks like magic or power that's just shooting out from the roots and goes into the forest in all directions. There's also a little bird and a fern in the foreground that you can see. Lots of symbolism here, lots going on. So the first thing that came to mind when I saw this card for us is the time of year that I'm recording this, which, you'll be listening to it at whatever time of year for you, but I want you to consider this. It is the coming of spring. I am currently recording this on the first day of spring, technically, March 20th, which is the spring equinox here in the Northern Hemisphere where we live. Which is a fantastic time for us pagan type folks or people who are just really engaged in spirituality to start imagining what offerings we are giving. So a lot of the ancestors would be giving offerings to the land and the trees and the bulbs and seeds that are being planted. It's a very sexual energy because it's all about kind of rebirth and sexuality and conception and things like that. So it gives the impression that, we want the gods of the higher powers of the land and the earth to provide for us. We need the harvest season to be abundant, so we might choose to give offerings. And it's just a really great reminder to have that kind of energy of gratitude towards things. Like, I am so grateful for the trees, for offering the oxygen we breathe and the food that we eat and all that they do to nourish the soil. They provide us with so much. We would not be here. We would not survive. We would not live without the plants and the trees and the birds and the bees and all of the things. So giving them our appreciation is really powerful. I can see, like, on the branches, there's not just little ribbons, but also feathers tied to the branches, which is a great offering because things like hair, feathers, ash, our coffee grounds, those are things that can actually nourish trees and nourish the soil. So, leaving dead things around can actually be an offering, not just symbolically, but a sign of, caretaking of the plant itself. And I love also that this white power that you see coming from the roots and connecting to all of the trees. I often use that in symbolism for visualization and meditation. When I'm doing a guided meditation, I will offer an image of grounding roots like a tree into the ground, but I do like to imagine that those roots also spread their connection some way to all of the other roots of the other trees in the forest, giving this idea of we are all connected, we are supported, we are part of a community, part of a tribe. We can lean on others while they can lean on us. It's a powerful imagery that I think everyone needs reminding of from time to time. And now, what does this have to do with our story today? Well, we're going to talk about spring coming, and it's okay if you're not listening to this in spring or like it is the spring equinox, so that will have passed already. I do want to talk about it because at any point in our lives, we are going through cycles and seasons. We can go through mini cycles throughout the day, throughout the month, even in an hour and a half. When I do a healing session, it's an entire healing cycle. So we're always cycling. And what the spring cycle is going to look like in our healing work, in our lives, it is the rebirth part of our healing. It's the part where we come into ourselves. We've taken the hardships and the darkness that we have confronted with, and we're bringing it into light. And the idea of light and dark plays very well in the story I'm about to tell you. And I'm going to tell you the story of Blodeuwedd, one of my absolute favorite stories in the Mabinogi, which is the Welsh mythology. I love studying. I've taken a few classes from some very, very wonderful people who are authors and experts in Celtic studies. So one course that I took actually went through deep dives into the 5 goddesses or ladies, depending on how you look at it, of the Mabinogi. So the stories in the branches, there are 4 branches in the Mabinogi, and this story comes from the 4th branch. It is Blodeuwedd. She is an amazing figure to bring forward during this time of year. And the last full moon that we had this month is the first of 4 moons in the time of Blodeuwedd, according to the Mythic Moons of Avalon by Jenna Tellendry, who I studied with, who I studied from. I should just give her the credit she deserves. She's my mentor. I don't know if she would even know that she is my mentor, but I've taken classes from her. I went on pilgrimage with her, so I look up to her quite a bit. So a lot of this information is something that I've gathered from her and my studies. But Blodeuwedd is such a powerful story. And I think by the time I'm done with this story, you will love her as much as I do. Now, her story starts at the tail end of the story of Arianrhod. Arianrhod was a prominent lady of her time. She had her own castle, her own island. Her uncle was king. It was through her line that the kingship or the throne would be inherited. So she happenstance find herself in the position of being a mother. And the story of how that works out is just kind of a little bit hilarious and a little bit crazy. I won't go into that because it is not her story today, but she finds herself the mother of a son. And not particularly pleased about it either. And some kind of paint her as the villain of that story because she is cursing her son. The perspective I choose to take on it, which was what I was taught, is that she doesn't curse him, she tests him. She gives him these obstacles in his way of becoming king so that he will be tested and proven worthy before he is allowed to be king. As kings should be tested. So she's kind of the hero of this story. She tests him, gives him some tests where she tells him he will not have a name save for what she will give him. So saying, you will not get a name unless I give you one. And then her uncle, who raised the boy, is magical. He's a magical sorcerer type, and he tricks her into giving him a name. And his name is Blodeuwedd, if I'm saying that right. My Welsh is not great, but I'm trying. I'm learning. So this means fair hair or light hair with a steady hand is what his name is. And then she says, you will not bear arms, save for that I give you. Again, she gets tricked into giving him a sword, and he has a weapon, and therefore he is able to bear arms. The third one is really kind of important and special because she says, you will not marry a woman of this earth. Now, being married and having a queen was, in Welsh tradition and Celtic tradition of that time, was very important because a king would not be allowed kingship unless he was able to marry a woman who represented the land itself. So the marriage wasn't just of noble blood to noble blood, which is probably more the traditions of England, Britain, and that was in later times. This goes back, way back, and a lot of people believe that the stories are before Christianity and were only written down after Christianity's influence. But we're going to suspend disbelief for a moment and say, if these stories are as old as we think they are, chances are that a king or chief of his clan would never be allowed to ascend to the throne and have that kind of power if he wasn't able to make certain oaths and promises to the land itself. And so in a lot of these stories, there is what we call a sovereignty goddess, an archetype of woman that represents the very land itself, and that this person does not allow the man to ascend his power, to step into kingship without her blessing, without her agreeing he's worthy, without, and then in a lot of times that's a marriage. So think of King Arthur's story, and again, King Arthur and Arthur's story is is rooted in Wales. So the same kind of idea. He was not made king unless he could have pulled the sword from the stone and then received Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake. So the Lady of the Lake, being the sovereignty goddess in this particular story, would be like, she allows him to receive this blessing, this sword, and say he's king. Okay, so long story short, Arianrhod, or long story long, I guess, Arianrhod tests him and says, you cannot have a woman of this earth. You cannot marry a woman of this earth, and therefore kind of keeps him from becoming king unless he can figure out how to do that. Well, his magical uncle, his magical great uncle who raised him, so wonderful is he, his name's Math, and he creates a woman out of oak, broom. Broom is not the thing that you sweep with. That's called a besom. Broom is actually a plant that was used to make besoms. So when we call something a broom, we're actually calling it the plant that makes the besom. That makes sense. So broom and meadowsweet. These three things, the blossoms of these plants, were used to create a woman. So she's not a woman of this earth because she's made from flowers. And her name means flowers. It's spelled without a W in it. It's Blodeuwedd. Blodeuwedd. I'm not exactly sure if I'm saying it correctly, but they're different. So Blodeuwedd means flowers. Blodeuwedd means flowers. And what's interesting, what I learned in some of my studies, is these three things she's made from don't actually bloom at the same time, which gives us the impression that if she was made, it was probably quite a process, maybe like taking a whole year to make her from these flowers. So she is magicked into life by these flowers, by Great Uncle Math. And now Blodeuwedd has his wife, his bride. Now, the problem with that is that Blodeuwedd, she is not created for someone else. She is, but in her mind and in our mind, why should that make her obligated to be this man's wife? So while flowers turn towards the light or the sun for nourishment, Llu's name meaning light, flowers turn to the light. So the symbolism here is that the flowers are made with the light. So they were supposed to turn towards light for nourishment. She was made from flowers. She's meant to be his wife. But in creating her own destiny, she has a bit of a adventure, because while Llywelyn is off somewhere fighting in a battle, she comes upon a soldier passing through, and she, like a hospitable lady that she is, a lady of the castle, she invites them to stay, and she gets to know him better. His name is Granu. Granu, in the etymology of that name, we can kind of tie it back to hero or warrior. It's also his last name is, or surname, Granu Pebir. I'm not exactly sure how the Welsh is pronounced, so forgive me, my Welsh friends. Dwi dysgu Cymraeg. I'm learning this Welsh, but I'm not good at it. So, anyway, his last name, Pebir, it means strong, mighty, vibrant, shining. Now, Llywelyn meaning light, an oath. So she's made this oath to the light. But she meets Granu and she falls in love. They fall in love with each other. And that makes it quite sticky because in Welsh law, the time that the Mabinogi was written, and this is about 1100 AD, so it has some influences of Christianity at that time, but we believe the stories to be oral tradition much older. It's interesting because Welsh law had a lot to do with what is a marriage, what actually makes a marriage lawful. And in this case, a lot of people think, gosh, Blodeuwedd, she's such a, she steps out on her husband and falls in love with another guy? Well, if you take it into context, actually, Welsh law is a little tricky because you aren't married until you're married for a year. And then the wife or the husband can actually decide at that point that this marriage isn't working and you can go your separate ways, like an annulment, basically. And much to their credit, the women of Welsh at that time, the Wales women at the time, they had a little bit more autonomy, a little bit more say in who they got to marry. Now, the problem with this is that, so in Welsh law, they had to agree to be married. The woman herself had to say, yes, I will marry this person. So it wasn't quite like in England at the time where it was like women were just plain flat out property of their fathers and their husbands. So fathers were giving their daughters away, selling their daughters away to people, and it was kind of like, that's just a done deal. In Wales at the time, it was a little bit more like, I would like you to marry this man because it would be a good deal for all of us. But the daughter, the woman involved, had to agree. She has to agree that she's okay with it. The problem in this story is Blodeuwedd did not agree to this marriage with Llywelyn, right? She was just made out of flowers and said, here's your husband. Good luck. This is the way it is. So for her to choose Granu is actually more aligned with what she should have been able to do. She should have been able to choose who she wanted for a husband. And unfortunately for Llywelyn, she chose Granu. So he stays with her for 3 days. She asks him to stay with her at the castle, whether she's been a good hostess, but she has fallen in love, and she says, please stay with me one more night. And during this time, they realize they're in love. They are going to need to make a life for themselves, but they have to get Llywelyn out of the way. And this is where it gets a little, come on, guys. So instead of just being like, hey, let's just be together. Let's just run away together. We are in love. They have devised a plan to kill Llywelyn. Llywelyn himself is sort of an otherworldly character. He is magical. He cannot just be killed so easily. So there's going to need to be a plan set in place. And so they come up with a plan. And to do this, Blodeuwedd waits till her husband comes back and says, so she comes up with this plan where she's going to kind of pretend concern for him. She's going to say, oh, my husband, while you've been away, I've been just absolutely wrecked with worry about whether or not you will die. And I just need you to ease my troubled heart. I just die inside thinking of you being in danger and dying. And Llywelyn says, oh, darling, you don't need to wreck yourself with worry. I am really difficult to kill, actually. I'm almost impossible to kill. So you don't need to worry yourself. And she's like, okay. Well, just to ease my troubled heart, could you just please tell me if someone were to want to kill you, how would they do that? I know it sounds so obvious. You could see right through it. But Llywelyn, I guess, trusts his wife so much that he says, well, in order to kill me, you would have to have all these stipulations in place. And it's actually really complicated. I think I have it written down here somewhere, but it's this whole complicated affair of situations that have to be in place for Llywelyn to be killed. It's like he has to have 1 foot in the water of a certain creek, of a certain place. 1 foot is going to be on a goat or something. And it has to be in a trough that's covered with a roof. All of these things have to be in place. And basically the idea of that is that it cannot be inside or outside. It's not on dry land or on water. It's all the in-betweens. So in the Celtic folklore, in-between spaces are incredibly powerful, incredibly magical. So like the threshold of a doorway, for example. A lot of mythology will have, someone in the threshold, or not quite dark, but not quite light, like the twilight or dawn time of day. It's not daylight, it's not night, in the other world. So this is what this represents. It's kind of an in-between space. He has to be hit with a spear that is a certain kind of spear, and it has to go through the hole of a rock. It's a whole thing. So he tells her all of this, and Blodeuwedd is like, oh, well, that just makes me feel a lot better. But actually, it would make me feel even better if I could see it. If I could see what you're talking about. I'm just having a really hard time picturing it. If you could just try and put yourself in that position so that I can see how it would be that someone might kill you. And then basically sets this all up so that he would be in position in the creek, 1 foot in the creek, 1 foot on a goat, all the things in place so that Granu could be hiding in the bushes and with the spear ready to kill him. And so that is what happens. Granu kills Llywelyn. Instead of killing him dead, though, Llywelyn becomes an eagle and flies away. And then Granu and Blodeuwedd, they are free to run away together. Now, it would all be just great for them if it wasn't for Math, the sorcerer. He's going to go out looking for Blodeuwedd. So first he's going to go out looking for Llywelyn. He's going to go find him. He's turned into an eagle. He's not dead. So he's going to go looking for him, and he goes chasing this trail that he finds, and then he's under an oak tree, which, remember, from the beginning, Blodeuwedd was made from the blossoms of an oak tree. He goes and stands under this oak tree, and he feels like maggots and yucky stuff falling on him, and he looks up and he sees that the eagle has landed on the branch of the oak tree, and he's shedding maggots out of his feathers. Like, he's not good. This makes me feel like death, because like he's not well. He's looking pretty rough from what I understand. And so Math finds him. Now, what's interesting about this, and this is also going into the symbology of this story and considering different angles, if you will, that maybe Llywelyn still loved Blodeuwedd so much that he sought an oak tree to be close to her. Maybe he was so devastated at the betrayal of his love, of the woman who was supposed to be his wife, that he went to the oak tree for solace. And I think that's very sweet. I think we can entertain that idea for a moment. But Math finds him and turns him back into a man, into the king that he is. But he has to go chasing after, now Llywelyn is chasing after Granu and ends up killing him. And Math finds Blodeuwedd, who is running away, and he changes her into an owl. And there's a lot of really cool symbology and really things to consider about this as well, because he turns into an owl because in that tradition, in that culture, owls were seen as the most hated birds of the bird kingdom because they were cast to only hunt at night. All the other birds are in the daytime. They don't want to associate with the owl. The owl is kind of an outcast. So that is maybe her punishment for what she's done, is she's going to be made into an owl. But I want you to, again, to remember that the symbolism of this, when it comes to the flower maiden, who she was in the beginning of the story, made from flowers. Flowers seek light, and Llaw representing the light, Granu representing the dark hero of our story, represents the dark. And so when she's punished, she is turned into an owl, which is a dark figure because they hunt and they are nocturnal, hunt at night. So this whole story gives a lot of symbolism in the dark and the light half of the year. As we come into the spring equinox, the equinox being the halfway point between the dark and the light, it is an excellent time for us to consider what rebirth we are going through, what we are moving towards as we balance out the dark, which was the winter, which is the dark moon every month. We get a chance to sit in darkness, in rest, in reclaiming sort of phase. We get to take on confrontation, confronting our shadow side, our shadow selves. And then we get to move that into light. As the spring comes on, we are invited to take our darkest parts of ourselves, bringing them into light, meaning that we don't conquer them. We don't push them. We don't destroy them. We are learning to love the parts of ourselves that we can sometimes feel is sabotaging us or it can be difficult. And that means addressing things that are uncomfortable, things about ourselves or things that we really, really don't want to be, or things that trigger us, and saying, what part of that just needs a little extra love and protection so that it can feel comfortable enough to step into its power. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but this is a really interesting just kind of side myth to think about, is the story of Mary Magdalene. When I started studying Gnostic Gospels and reading Mary Magdalene Revealed, Megan Watterson, she wrote that book and kind of highlighted some really important things about that, because we often associate Mary Magdalene, her reputation not so great because of the way she was painted by the Roman Catholic Church in the beginning, but it was saying, stories about her in the Bible about how her demons, right? There were demons that needed to be exorcised from her, and that's kind of one of the famous stories of Mary Magdalene. But Another consideration from Mary's gospel is that it's not demons that we're exorcising, that we're casting out, that we're like conquering. Instead, what if it's the powers? That those demons are our power. That when they don't align with who we are, our higher self, they may run rampant and cause us a lot of problems. But if they are seen as our power and used as a power, they can actually be our most amazing assets about ourselves. Yeah, there's a lot of healing work invited when doing that kind of thing. And the work that I do in the balance is being able to see that both the light and the dark and all shades in between are very sacred. The in-between is where the sacredness is in the Celtic folklore anyway. So the in-betweens is where we can find our balance. Now, the thing I love most about this story of Blodeuwedd, and what I want to be the takeaway today, is that even though she was created for a specific purpose, and that purpose was serving someone's need, they needed a wife for Llywelyn so that he would have a queen. Blodeuwedd carves her own path. She's not interested in just, what is it that you've created me for? But what do I believe I am created for? What is my path? And I think this story invites each and every one of us to look at how much energy, how much of myself, even from birth, from the very beginning of my life, how much have I been devoting to make sure I am what other people want me to be? That I'm living up to their expectations, to their needs, to what they see me as. And if I were to remove that, or even just set it aside, leave room for me to figure out who I am and what I am for. What is my purpose? What is my passion? When I look back at my life, on my deathbed at 89 years old or whatever age I am, will I be more proud of the things I've done that were aligned with me, myself, what I wanted to do with my life? Or will I feel like I was always doing and living for others and their approval and their expectations? Now, we do that for a reason. This is not a judgment on you shouldn't be doing that, because we do that to connect and bond with our community. There's nothing wrong with being like, hey, I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of other people's lives. I want people to see me as at service. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but is it aligned with you and your purpose? Because that is the invitation Blodeuwedd's story is inviting us to look at. She may have been created from flowers to be the wife of Llywelyn, but she decided it was up to her to write her own story. Unfortunately, in this story, doesn't have a super happy ending for poor Blodeuwedd and Granw, but in all fairness, they did try to kill her husband. And maybe that was the wrong way to go about it. I don't know. You can debate the rights and wrongs of things if you want. But I think it's a beautiful story, and I absolutely love inviting the energy, the archetype of Blodeuwedd into my life during this springtime. Considering all of the things that I am working on and the healing that I'm doing on myself, what does her story have to do with that? What does it inspire? So I'm going to invite you to think about that as well. And hopefully, at least here in Utah where we live, our spring weather will be coming soon. As we know, spring doesn't actually hit until around the end of April here in Utah. If you're surprised by that, you haven't lived here long enough, I guess, because that is the way it goes. But we are going to start inviting the energy of spring today. Tonight is My Body, My Dance party, where we're going to dance, move our bodies, and welcome spring. I've seen the daffodils starting to break and bloom, which means spring is just around the corner. And that makes me so happy to be coming out of the cocoon and rebirthing into the next phase of life. All right, to close our lovely time together, friends, I would like to thank Ride the Wave Media, Just Blaine, who produces and is the network in which this podcast is possible. So if you're interested in a sponsorship of this or any of the Ride the Wave Media awesomeness, all of the things produced there, please get in touch with us. They are an amazing group of people to work with. So I want to give them a shout out and a thank you for all the very hard work that they do and amazing good work that they do. I would also like to thank Sarah Albert at the Sunshine Community. I am part of and am now officially ambassador of the Sunshine Community, women in business supporting each other and holding events and teaching classes and all of the things that make us an amazing group of women. I truly believe that it's something to preserve, something to highlight, and something to recognize. I'm going to give a special shout out today to the Daybreak Inclusion and Pride people who are working very hard to prepare for the event in June. I am very much supportive and ally and part of the LBGQT community and proudly show my rainbow flag no matter what the political climate is telling me. I'm excited and enthusiastic about inclusion. So My Body, My Dance party tonight is giving 10% of the profits to Pride. It may not be much for this event, but we've been working very hard to raise money when we can and at least awareness to what they're doing over there. And I'm excited to be a part of it. So I'll be at that event in June. I'll be there reading cards and doing portraits. So if you want to come to the event, if you're local, please come see me. Check out my booth at Ride the Wave Media. We're going to be having a great time. And as always, if anyone is willing and able to support the show, I would love to see subscribe if you're on YouTube or a follow on any of the other platforms that we have this podcast out. We are building a lot of great listens and follows and community this way, and then we can provide more content for you that hopefully improves your life and gives a little magic to your life. So with that, you can follow me. I am Courtney Pearl. I own Prism Healing. I do healing work, card reading, all the things. And you can find me at prism-healing.com. And you can find me on Instagram, prism_healing. Facebook, Courtney Pearl's Prism Healing. I might be changing that soon to just Prism Healing if I can, if Facebook will let me. But Prism Healing, you'll find me. You'll get me. And I am here in Daybreak. So I can do sessions from anywhere. I have clients in Canada, Hawaii, all over. So if you are somewhere not local here in Utah, that's totally fine. I can do sessions from anywhere. So find me on Prism Healing and we can do a consultation call and I can answer any of your questions. And one more thing, please private message me on any of those platforms if you have any particular questions or topics you would like to address on this podcast, something that might help you, or if there's a particular situation you find yourself in and you'd like to get my input, I would love to use that as a catalyst for conversation on this podcast. So message out, reach out to me, and we'll help you out as best we can. I hope you enjoyed today's story time. Look out for my storytime episodes and my guided meditation episodes, and of course all of the healing content that I provide on my regular episodes. We'll see you next time. Go make magic, witches and wizards.